Chapter 9 of Colonel Quaritch, V.C. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Colonel Quaritch, V.C. by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 9. The Shadow of Ruin. Mr. Quest departed to his vestry meeting with a smile upon his thin, gentlemanly-looking face, and with a rage and bitterness in his heart. "I caught her that time," he said to himself. "She can do a good deal in the way of deceit, but she can't keep the blood out of her cheeks when she hears that fellow's name. How she did colour up, to be sure. But she is a clever woman, Belle is. How well she managed that little business about the luncheon, and how well she fought her case when once she caught me in a cleft stick about Edith and that money of hers, and made good terms too. Ah, that's the worst of it. She has the whip hand of me there. If I could ruin her, she could ruin me, and it's no use cutting off one's nose to spite your face. But my fine lady," he went on, with an ominous flash of his grey eyes, "I shall have you yet. Give you enough rope and you will hang yourself. You will love this fellow, I know that, and it will go hard if I can't make him break your heart for you. Bah! You don't know the sort of stuff men are made of. If only I did not happen to be in love with you myself, I should not care. Here I am at the church." The human animal is a very complicated machine, and can conduct the working of an extraordinary number of different interests and sets of ideas, almost, if not entirely, simultaneously. For instance, Mr. Quest, seated at the right hand of the rector in the vestry room of the beautiful old Boisingham church, and engaged in an animated and even warm discussion with the senior curate on the details of the 14th century church work, in which he clearly took a lively interest and understood far better than did the curate, would have been exceedingly difficult to identify with the scheming, vindictive creature whom we have just followed up the church path. But after all, that is the way of human nature, although it may not be the way of those who try to draw it, and who love to paint the villain black as your hat, and the virtuous heroine so radiant that you begin to fancy you hear the whispering of her wings. Few people are altogether good or altogether bad. Indeed, it is probable that the vast majority are neither good nor bad. They have not the strength to be either the one or the other. Here and there, however, one does meet with a spirit with sufficient will and originality to press the scale down this way or that, though even when the opposing force, be it good or evil, is constantly striving to bring the balance equal. Even the most wicked men have their redeeming points and their righteous instincts, nor are their thoughts continually fixed upon iniquity. Mr. Quest, for instance, one of those evil geniuses of this history, was, where his plots and passions were not immediately concerned, a man of eminently generous and refined tendencies. Many were the good turns, contradictory as it may seem, that he had done to his poorer neighbours. He had even been known to forego his bills of costs, which is about the highest and rarest exhibition of earthly virtue that can be expected from a lawyer. He was, moreover, eminently a cultured man, a reader of the classics in translations, if not in the originals, a man with a fine taste in fiction and poetry, and a really sound and ripe archaeological knowledge, especially where sacred buildings were concerned. All his instincts, moreover, were toward respectability. His most burning ambition was to secure a high position in the county in which he lived, and to be classed among the resident gentry. He hated his lawyer's work, and longed to accumulate sufficient means to be able to give it the good-bye, and to indulge himself in an existence of luxurious and learned leisure. Such as he was, he had made himself, for he was the son of a poor and inferior country dentist, and had begun life with a good education, it is true, which he chiefly owed, however, to his own exertions, but with nothing else. Had his nature been a temperate nature, with a balance of good to its credit to draw upon, instead of a balance of evil, he was a man who might have gone very far indeed, for in addition to his natural ability he had a great power of work. But unfortunately this was not the case, His instincts on the whole were evil instincts, and his passions, whether of hate or love or desire or greed, when they seized him, did so with extraordinary violence, rendering him for the time being utterly callous to the rights or feelings of others, provided that he attained his end. In short, had he been born to a good position and a large fortune, it is quite possible, providing always that his strong passions had not at some period in his life led him irremediably astray, that he would have lived virtuous and respected, and died in good order, leaving behind him a happy memory. But fate had played him in antagonism with the world, and yet had endowed him with a gnawing desire to be of the world as it appeared most desirable to him. And then, to complete his ruin, fate had thrown him into temptations from which inexperience and the headlong strength of his passions gave him no opportunity to escape. It may at first appear strange that a man so calculating, and whose desires seemed to be fixed upon such a material end as the acquirement of wealth which he coveted, by artifice or even fraud, should also nourish in his heart so bitter a hatred and so keen a thirst for revenge upon a woman who had been unfaithful to him, as Mr. Quest undoubtedly did towards his beautiful wife. It would have seemed more probable that he would have left heroics alone, and attempted to turn his wife's passion into a means of wealth and self-advancement, and this would no doubt have been so had his wife's estimate of his motives in marrying her been an entirely correct one. She had told her lover, it will be remembered, that her husband had married her for her money, the £10,000 of which he stood so badly in need. Now this was the truth to a certain extent, and a certain extent only. He had wanted the £10,000. In fact, at the moment money was necessary to him. But, and this his wife had never known or realised, he had been, and still was, also in love with her. Possibly the £10,000 would have proved a sufficient inducement to him without the passion, but the passion was none the less there. Their relations, however, had never been happy ones. She had detested him from the first, and had not spared to say so. No man with any refinement, and whatever he lacked, Mr. Quest had refinement, could bear to be thus continually repulsed by a woman, and so it came to pass that their relations had always been of the most strained nature. Then, when she at last had obtained the clue to the secret of his life, under threat of exposure she drove her bargain, of which the terms were complete separation in all but outward form, and virtual freedom of action for herself. This, considering the position, she was perhaps justified in doing, but her husband never forgave her for it. More than that, he determined, if by any means it were possible, to turn the passion which, although she did not know it, he was perfectly aware she bore towards his business superior, Edward Cossey, to a refined instrument of vengeance against her, with what success it will be one of the purposes of his history to show. Such were, put as briefly as possible, the outlines of the character and aims of this remarkable and contradictory man, whose history, had he but possessed a sense of honour, might very probably have been painted in very different colours. Within an hour and a half of leaving his own house, the Oaks as it was called, although the trees from which it had been so named had long since vanished from the garden, Mr. Quest was bowling swiftly behind Edward Cossey's powerful bay horse toward the towering gateway of Honham Castle. When he was within 300 yards he pulled the horse up sharply, for he was a good whip and alone in the dog cart, and paused to admire the view. What a beautiful place, he reflected to himself with enthusiasm, and how grandly those old towers stand out against the sky. The old squire has restored them very well too, there is no doubt about it. I could not have done it better myself. I wonder if that place will ever be mine. Things look black now, but they may come round, and I think I am beginning to see my way. And then he started the horse on again, slowly reflecting on the unpleasant nature of the business before him. Personally, he rather liked and respected the old squire, and he certainly pitied him, though he would